What does it take? What does it take to change the essence of a man? How much? How much money is enough? How low? How low can your box office performance sink?
Hello, I'm Karri. Welcome to the Flick Lab. Henrik, my co-host, can you ride a horse?
I actually can. Not very well. I must confess, but I can do the basics.
No, you can't. You can't. Of course you can't, because you're not a Native American.
Well, neither is our today's star. Even though he had the time period when he did his darnest to pass himself as one.
On Deadly Ground is his self-directed movie, and in this one there is this infamous line that I noticed. That Seagal asks his co-star actress, "Can she ride a horse?" And she responds, "Of course, I'm a Native American." Of course.
Of course. Well, when it comes to racial stereotypes, that's not the only one that shows up in On Deadly Ground. But yeah, for those, I'm certain that some of our listeners have already guessed who is our today's topic. Or if they did not guess, they read the thumbnail and got the answer from there. But yeah, our today's main star, the man of the hour, is none other than perhaps one of the biggest feminist icons in Hollywood. The man who is the self-embodied example of the fact that nationality and identity are basically fictional constructs, as we today see when an Italian man becomes a Japanese man, becomes a native man, becomes a black man, and becomes something else at the very end of the very dark and long journey. But yeah, we are talking about Steven Seagal.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. I don't even know where to begin, but Henrik is...
birth. The birth of Steven Seagal is a good place to start, I guess, because when it comes to the many legacies and the many histories of Seagal, God help us if there's not like infamous amount of starting points.
I would say that Steven Seagal's history from his younger years is not quite well known, but there are some books...
Not even to himself, apparently.
What? Is that so?
Well, there is, when it comes to the whole famous Aikido thing, there is, of course, some unanswered questions.
There's a lot of unanswered questions, and then later, unfortunately, answered questions to several to his claims. Oh my God! But where to begin? Steven Seagal was born in 1952 in the United States. I was actually at some point confused. Okay, is this guy coming from the US or where? Because he wears... He has influences from so all over the world that you can't kind of pinpoint this guy anymore. And even his looks are kind of... I was wondering at one point, like, does he have some Native American blood in him? Because he could pass for me as a Native American.
Well, apparently a few years ago, Seagal did a DNA test.
Mm-hmm.
And according to that test, Seagal would carry some Native American blood. The exact quantum is really locked on tight secret. Nobody knows how much native blood goes inside of Steven Seagal's veins. And this is, once again, since we are talking about Steven Seagal, something that kind of goes on unconfirmed until you see the test results yourself and can get a bias reading that confirms that yes, these test results are real.
Continuing from what we do know is that he did apparently spend several years in Japan, where he trained and actually was the first one, at least, foreigner to have his own Aikido dojo in Japan, where he did train some famous people as well. I don't know in Japan, but certainly in one of his dojos.
Yeah, apparently Seagal got this through marriage. The dojo originally was his father-in-law's, and well, some accusations have been raised up by the then wife of Seagal, who has made the statement that the only reason why Seagal got married with her and stayed married with her for all those years was simply so that Seagal could get his hands on the dojo.
One of the most remarkable achievements of his career is breaking the wrist of Sean Connery in 1982.
well, knowing that does explain why Never Say Never Again was such of a limp-wristed Bond movie.
Yeah, he did a lot of stunt coordinating from the early 80s at least. And then in the late 90s, he got the opportunity to play the lead in movies. His first one where he acted was Above the Law, straight into the big leagues, into the lead role. Followed by all these classics such as Hard to Kill, Marked for Death. Notice there's a certain pattern here. We have 3 syllables: Marked for Death, Hard to Kill, and Above the Law, almost. And yeah, this is
Out
something...
for Justice.
Kinda, yeah. This is something that, was it Warner Brothers that was pushing out these movies that they wanted to establish as a kind of a Seagal thing, the kind of a winning formula of the titles.
Yeah, it actually is a marketing and manufacturing trick that the Warner Bros. Pulled off.
Yeah, Out for Justice, yes, was indeed one of these early films that is seen as, I think, as kind of the core Seagal, the main, the best Seagal representation that you can find out there. Well, I would say that they are basically quite average action films, only kind of lifted slightly by the certain characteristics of Seagal that appeal to masses.
Yeah, and my take is that was also the reading that the industry got, or the years before Above the Law was released. The often unsung song of Seagal's career and how it all started is somewhat of a myth, but one version that is being spread around belongs to one of the Hollywood heavyweight agents, Michael Ovitz, who, well, once again, according to the story, Ovitz originally met with Seagal as he was Seagal's Aikido pupil. And Ovitz was one of these Hollywood agents that really had clout, who really had some weight that they could throw around in the circles. So much so that the then sentiment was that Ovitz can turn anyone, absolutely anyone, into a star. And Ovitz chose Seagal as a kind of a challenge, just to see exactly can he get away with it. And based on this, if I remember correctly, it was supposed to take on Warner Bros. Parking lot, where Ovitz then organized an Aikido show centered around Steven Seagal, which was supposed to show Steven Seagal's Aikido skills and his capabilities as a martial arts action star to the heads of Warner Bros. And apparently that went through to an extent that Warner Brothers were actually, they did sign Seagal for a number of pretty cheaply made action films that all ended up making a well, relatively very good bang at the box office. And that's kind of how the whole Seagal phenomena originally started.
These four titles plus Under Siege maybe could be seen as the core, the best of Seagal. That's at least widely so seen as. Environmentalism is something that is often featured in his film, especially in this one film that he has directed on Deadly Ground. And I forgot to mention that during Out for Justice, there apparently was, well, it was something that rised up years later, but that there were sexual harassment claims from three women who were apparently silenced with money, $50,000 per each. And on Deadly Ground, there were also accusations. This, of course, goes a little bit out of the sphere of like a movie podcast, to be honest. But I don't want to get too much stuck on this. But there's been a lot of accusations now over the years towards Seagal that he would have been sexually harassing girls on the sets or in so-called after parties and situations like this.
Yes, Steven Seagal and the opposite sex is such of a toxic mix that Seagal has become actually one of the most Me Too'd male actors in Hollywood.
Yeah, Gerald Schumann filed a case against Seagal and accused him of threatening and beating her during the filming of his film Deadly Ground. She wasn't acting in the film. And also in March 2018, Regina Simmons publicly claimed that in 1993, when she was 18, that Seagal would have even raped her for what should have been a wrap-up party for On Deadly Ground. But yeah, continuing on from this, then came Under Siege 2. This is one where Seagal was in some level of control, to the extent that he seemed to be very much a pain in the ass at the set because he would change entire scenes during filming. Unfortunately, he is also notorious for being the target of ridicule of his co-stars and stunt workers. In 1999, Seagal was awarded with the PETA Humanitarian Award. I wonder if that's still valid or they haven't seen the latest movies of Seagal. But
Well, it may be the same kind of situation as apparently is his romance status.
yeah, the puppy killer. But Exit Wounds in 2001 was one of the last theatrically released Seagal movies featuring the rapper DMX. And that was a relative success. It did a pretty okay bank, but unfortunately Seagal was unable to follow on that success. The following year in 2002, another rapper joined Half Past Dead, Ja Rule, or Ja Rule, however you pronounce this. And I heard that there were some problems between Ja Rule and Steven Seagal, because Steven Seagal is quite notorious also for being late to appear on the shooting sets. And around this time, he was also traveling with a buddhist advisor, and if this karma around the set wasn't favorable on one day, he would not be filming on that day, causing a complete chaos at the filming. He's been doing direct-to-video films for the last 20 years or so, being also often the writer-producer of these films, but has done mostly supporting roles since 2010s, where he's not anymore like in the lead, but some kind of a other person, as it turns out in the last movie that we're going to talk about today. He has played also bad guy in one rare occasion in Machete in 2010. And Steven Seagal thinks he's a cop, but it's only indeed a ceremonial title. And this TV series, yeah, he did a TV series called Steven Seagal Lawman. And he took this ceremonial title a little bit too far and acted as a cop. And then he drove a army surplus tank through through a person's fence and killed a puppy in the process. It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
either the tank that killed the puppy or it was gunshots, according to the victim or the family. But I don't know.
Yeah, the lawman time period would also be when Steven Seagal netted himself also those human trafficking and sex slave keeping accusations.
Oh boy, and it doesn't end there, boys. There's
No.
mafia and yeah. Anything about that mafia? Want to go with that?
Well, holy shit, if that ain't tangled mess.
Oh my.
So, apparently, once again, this is a lot of he said, she said things. Steven Seagal has said quite a lot about what went down and how. But the general gist, as much as at least I have been able to piece it together, would be that back in the days, Steven Seagal was working with a producer, Julius Nassau. And Nassau was someone who did have mafia connections. Was it the Gambino crime family?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Steven Seagal had made a deal that the Nassau would be presenting him, and Nassau would have made something like a 4-movie deal on Seagal's behalf. On that, Steven does his action movie shit in action movies. Now, unfortunately for basically everyone, this was also the time when Steven Seagal had found Buddhism after some guru had declared that Steven Seagal is tulpa or something like that.
Yeah, was this the moment when he also refused to kill people in the movies because he wasn't supposed to kill people anymore?
Yeah, this is precisely that moment. Um, and well, due to these his whole newfound found Buddhism and his I refuse to do violent action movies thing that was going on. Well, that of course landed Seagal into some heap of trouble. He did try to balance his stardom and his Buddhism in some features, like for example in the direct to video action film The Patriot, which is one of those Steven Seagal action movies where Steven Seagal pretty much does jack shit. Seagal's whole gambit was that the Warner Brothers would put him on some serious drama films based on his acting abilities, but the whole plan kind of laid upon, Seagal's acting abilities, so nothing came from that. So Steven was stuck with action movies and refusing to kill. And this led into some pretty hilarious instances. Like, for example, when making The Glimmer Man, which is the Steven Seagal chases a serial killer film. And there is the moment when Steven has finally cornered the serial killer Christopher Maynard at the church, where Maynard is holding priest as a hostage on gunpoint, and the situation is supposed to heat up, and Steven shoots the serial killer. And of course, that's a violent act. Steven didn't want to do that. So the director of that film, John Gray, came to the actor of the serial killer Maynard, actor named Stephen Topolsky, and was to him like, Stephen, we have a huge problem. Seagal is supposed to kill you on this scene, but he refuses to do so. So can you do anything? And well, apparently Topolsky went to Seagal and told him like that his character is down, like at the very bottom of the barrel. He's a serial killer. There's no redeeming qualities on him, and he's going to be reincarnated after his death, because life goes on, and we all have the rebirth after we die. So if Seagal would kill him on the scene, it would kind of be a service for his character, because now his character, who is a serial killer, could be reborn as a better person. And this finally made Seagal okay the scene where he shoots Maynard to death. Only for it, be like 2 weeks later when the director Gray once again comes to Topolsky and is like, Steven, we have a new problem with Seagal. Can you please help us out? Because apparently Seagal had gone out of his way on the sound takes on the ADR of the film to play the point that, well, he only wounded Maynard in the church shooting and didn't really kill him. This, despite the fact that the film itself shows how Maynard's chest like explodes from the gunshot wound. So now Topolsky was asked to do some post edit ADR and come up with some kind of line that they could just play when Maynard is not on screen, and this way through audio cues kind of point out that Maynard is still alive. And well, Topolsky did what was asked. He muttered something like, just fucking kill me, just end me now, that type of lines. And well, luckily studio cut it out. But it was because of these type of antics that eventually landed Steven Seagal in problem with Nassau, who then went to Gambino crime family and asked for their help to put Steven online and get him on with the program. And this is kind of where the story starts to differ, because, well, Steven tells that he got summoned by the Campino bosses into a meeting, and he went to the meeting armed and feeling no fear and what have you. And Campinos have the story that Steven was absolutely terrified during the meeting, and he was kind of forcibly brought into it. But apparently they got something like $500 to $700 pay up from Steven, or Steven at least promised to pay that amount of money, and they would also later on get the cut from the paychecks that that Seagal would receive from doing the last of his action movies. Then, of course, there was, well, at least two reporters who started to chase the story of Seagal's mafia connections. Steven apparently used an Hollywood private investigator as a middleman for him to hire an ex-convict to threaten these two journalists. The first one, who was Anita Bush, who had her car windshield broken, and through that broken windshield, she found a package that had a rose, a dead fish, and a note that just said, "Stop." These apparently the roses and dead fishes were because that the plan was to indicate that it was the Italian mob at business. Somebody had been watching The Godfather perhaps one times too many. Another journalist who got intimidated was the Vanity Fair journalist Ned Zeman, who stopped at the traffic lights only to have a car stop next to him, open its window, point out a gun at Zeman and say, "Bang, stop whatever you are doing," and driving off.
Oh my god.
Yep. Of course, the private investigator eventually would be caught by the FBI. That was a huge scandal. The investigator was working like a whole bunch of high class Hollywood celebrities, and apparently this wasn't the only shady deal that he had done. There was also some undocumented guns that were found on the premises, some unlicensed wiretaps that he had installed, a whole lot of number. And of course, there was also a separate investigation on the Gambino crime family. And eventually this all culminated on Seagal being ordered to testify in front of the court about his connections and dealings and his past with Gambino crime family. And this is one of the kind of infamous moments for Steven Seagal, because the legal defense on Gambino's side actually brought up a number of Steven Seagal's past stories that Seagal himself had told, versus the verified facts that they had managed to dig up to showcase to everyone that Steven Seagal is a pathological liar. This is also the court case where Steven Seagal, once again under oath, had to confess that during his meeting with the Gambinos, he had been terrified and afraid for his life.
And the director who was sending the Gambino crime family on to Steven Seagal was convicted for 1 year and 1 day. And then he got out, and a couple of years later, he brought another court case against Steven Seagal. And this was settled outside of court.
Yeah, this was something like a multi-million case
60 million.
Against Seagal. Yeah, 60 million case against Seagal, based on the fact that Seagal had broke the deal that he had made with Nassau.
Yeah. Be careful out there, all the people trying to get into Hollywood. There might be some interesting personalities. And for the information of our listeners, another little interesting case. Out for Justice and Gene LaBelle, I believe, a stunt coordinator. Yeah, he was with Steven Seagal at the set, according to the coordinator. And Steven Seagal was going on something about that. I have this certain technique that I can get myself out of any kind of a luck that you impose on me. And then the coordinator was like, okay, well, let's see, Seagal. And then unfortunately, Seagal couldn't get out of this lock, passed out, and apparently his bowels gave way. But that's the story, of course. If you listen to Steven Seagal's rebuttal to the story, he says that nothing like this ever happened, and that the stunt coordinator is a pathological liar. And he just said that all the encounters that he had with Gene LaBelle were nothing but pleasant, but that they didn't have anything much of an encounter there anyway, just pleasant encounters whenever they were discussing anything. But that this would have been completely fabricated. I'm just bringing Steven Seagal's side here because I know that the other side is also, I wouldn't say that it's a very pleasant way to bring this up or to present the information. So I get this very malevolent vibe from the other side.
Yeah, when it comes to LaBelle, when it comes to stuntmen altogether, there is, once again, quite a lot of everything going on behind. There's a lot of cock punching going on. Steven Seagal apparently, reportedly, has been quite abusive towards his stunt doubles. One of the favorite tricks that Seagal rumoredly has loved to play out is that he kicks his stuntmen on the balls to see if they are wearing a cup. Some of these stunts are of such caliber that stuntmen have had to be hospitalized. And
yeah, it's not like there's a lot of reports such as that. When there have been some stunt scenes involving Steven Seagal, that he would be taking it seriously and actually punching these actors because it makes the scene more realistic. But that's not kind of what you're supposed to do on a film set.
no, it's called acting.
Yeah.
But then again, Steven Seagal is ferociously against acting, as he himself views it as such, that you are not supposed to act, you're supposed to be. But yeah, the LaBelle chokehold, it is kind of, Like there is a lot of bad blood between stuntmen like Lebel and Seagal. And when it comes to that incident that you mentioned, yeah, it's once again like such of many things with Seagal that also is he said she said kind of
Yeah,
type of situation. Seagal maintains that Lebel was there only to give him back massage,
yeah.
and Lebel himself makes the case that apparently Seagal's "I can't break out of any lock, I can't be choked" move was that he tried to punch Lebel on the balls.
But of course, we know of these antics that he would be doing these antics at the set that would need hospitalization for stuntmen, or that he would arrive to the set very late, which is very disrespectful, or these weird things that he would be late for 45 minutes apparently, according to again one anecdote, and then that the first things that he would basically say is that, well, I just read the best script of my life. Okay, who wrote it? Well, me.
I did.
I did.
Yeah, on top of that, apparently Steven Seagal also refuses to memorize his lines
Yeah, or rehearse.
or rehearse. But then again, that's also one of these kings of the high class Hollywood actors. Like Marlon Brando also had the same shtick as
Yeah.
also has had the post wife beating Johnny Depp.
And Marlon Brando was a pain in the ass to work with as well. So
Mm. But something that we can say for certain is that Seagal is no Brando.
no, he's Seagal. Well, something else regarding his nationalities. He's not only the national of the, or the citizen of the United States. He nowadays holds the passport of Serbia since January 2016, and of Russian Federation since November 2016.
Yeah, apparently Seagal has a serious thing for kissing Russian oligarchs. Another side who is really well known for their respect towards human rights.
Yeah, yeah. I actually had not noticed that his political sense has gone so bad. So I haven't been keeping a close eye on him for years. So, but yeah, I'm not surprised. So he has had some trips to Serbia, and Serbia was willing to give him the nationality. And then, according to at least one spokesman from Russia, Steven Seagal had been asking for the Russian passport for some time and being kind of insistent upon it. Got his wish and has met Vladimir Putin, whom he considers his brother.
From another mother.
Yeah. Okay, but today's movies. Okay. Should we start with our first one?
Perhaps, yeah. What is today's lineup of movies? Because we most definitely, since you mentioned that the five best Seagal films of his entire career, that's not the lineup we have.
No. Yeah, so I took the liberty to look at his career more as a whole, not only his so-called classics, so you get a better idea of what has been going on. Uh, we start with Above the Law from 1988. Then we would look at Under Siege, which is often considered his best film from 1992. Then we would jump to On Deadly Ground 1994, which he directed himself. Then some insights of Fire Down Below from 1997. Then Attack Force 2006, which is kind of from the middle of his direct-to-video jungle. And then Beyond the Law 2019, which is his latest film.
It sounds like pretty comprehensive cut up of Seagal.
Well, I was thinking about this during doing my background research, and there are so many ways that you could go about this episode. I mean, we could completely upend this episode and just do completely different movies. We could start with, I don't know, Out for a Kill. Then we could take, well, I guess Under Siege has to be there. Then On Deadly Ground, and then you could take Exit Wounds would have been nice because it's kind of the last, let's say, highlight of his theatrical run. Then you could have taken this vampire shit movie, whichever it was, that you were suggesting for this episode.
Something dark or darkness.
And then, of course, there's the Machete where he plays a baddie. But, Above the Law. So his first film, directed by Andrew Davis, perhaps best known for Under Siege, though, and The Fugitive from 1993, working with Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones. And he also directed this Chuck Norris film, Code of Silence, 1985. The cinematography here is by Robert Steadman, also was part of the crew of Never Say Never Again, the infamous Bond film where Steven Seagal did some damage to Sean Connery. Screenwriters are Stephen Pressfield, his fiction novel writer, and then we have Andrew Davies and Ronald Shusett. He wrote the original story for Alien and Alien vs. Predator. Music by David Michael Frank, very established, over 80 credits in movie and TV. Okay. So,
yeah, apparently Above the Law, even though he doesn't really hold the credit for such, but the rumor exists that this was kind of co-written by Seagal himself.
well, for sure, if you look at the last lines of the film.
Yeah, and the Seagal's contribution most likely was mainly centered around the whole CIA angle that the film has. And that's kind of interesting note to take here at the very beginning, since, well, CIA, Seagal style, certain word views are something that kind of keep on creeping up and popping up throughout the entire run of today's episode.
Yeah, he is prone to acting characters that someday worked or are working currently for CIA or NSA or some intelligence agency or EPA or is ex-military or. But here today for Above the Law, this is a guy who became interested in Japanese martial arts, kind of like Steven Seagal himself, and in a party apparently he met a CIA guy who made him work for the CIA, but during one of the missions, he questioned the work ethics of this, let's call him the Man in Black type of CIA character, who was about to give some damage to this Viet Cong guy in Vietnam War. Seagal caused a scene there, and then he quit CIA. Got married. There's casual sexism loads in this film. Babe this, babe that, and woman. All of this. And you do your job and I'll do mine. Bank on it, pal. Maybe my favorite quote from these films. That's the best comeback line that I've heard from you do your job and I'll do mine.
Yeah, it's also something to note that only applies as long as your job is not being a reporter, because Above the Law from Seagal is the one that where Seagal reportedly, now there was a leaked audio clip from Seagal when he was marketing the film, where Seagal states that female reporters are all bunch of fucking whores and cocksuckers.
Seriously?
Yep.
Steven Seagal was just a fun guy who was able to kick ass properly and drop some beautiful one-liners every now and then. The more I hear about the guy, the more disgusting it sounds.
Well, not even kick ass properly. That's kind of the weird part of the whole action man Steven Seagal. As pointed out, Steven's background is in Aikido.
But he also has some training in some other martial arts.
Yeah, but mainly Aikido. That's kind of what Steven Seagal originally became famous for.
Yeah.
His Aikido skills. And he was kind of championed as the first Aikidos using Aikido background having action star in Hollywood. And the thing with Aikido is that it's the one martial arts where the point is that the practitioner of Aikido protects himself in a fight from the enemies, but also protects the enemies from harm. So it's extremely pacifistic form of martial arts or self-defense. Something that is based upon the concept that you as the Aikido master, you kind of you are holding yourself back. You are prohibiting yourself from harming others. And the whole point is that you kind of just wear the attacker down. You tire him down so that he ceases his attack. And as this happens, you as an Aikido practitioner, you end the cycle of violence. Because if would you attack, would you hurt him, you would just use kind of superior form of violence to harm another being. And that's precisely what's not Aikido's point.
Not to mention that martial arts in general, the whole idea is self-defense and not bringing the first strike. And here we have a guy who has his primary defense as Aikido, and he is using it to put people down left and right as the first strike.
Yeah, his signature move is to break another person's neck. As you do in Aikido.
As you do in Aikido. I was thinking of bringing my Aikido friend here, but I don't know. He couldn't tolerate watching 6 Steven Seagal films or 5. Yeah, what other lines have we here as gems? I don't think you can drop a soul, badass. You're right, but I'll get an A for effort. Then kills an unarmed man point blank. And runs away from the scene because realizes like, yeah, I think that didn't go actually quite as it should have.
But then again, as a whole, well, kind of two things to point out. First of all, Above the Law, as already brought up, it's one of the better Seagals.
Yeah.
This is kind of, once again, what is the best movie? It depends on who's answering, but this is one of the top tier Steven Seagal features, and it's also, curiously enough, it is kind of the birthing place of many of the problems that you see with Seagal throughout his career and throughout his off-screen personality. There's the heavy-handed symbolism that Seagal kind of loves to do. The main bad guy from the CIA end is a dude called Kurt Saigon, like you know, Kurtz from Apocalypse Now, the Vietnam War film. You know, take the first name and the first letter of the last name, and Saigon, almost like Saigon.
Yeah.
The film starts in Vietnam where Seagal's eyes open and he sees that the CIA is corrupt and crooked, and even the whole goddamn the governmental officials or governmental institutions like Central Intelligence Agency and the Central Intelligence Agency being a corrupt entity,
Yeah.
which is something also this kind of anti-governmental attitude is something.
It's something that repeats in his films over and over again.
It repeats. It also, funny enough, repeats also off screen. like I said, Above the Law, it's a birthplace of many kind of key features or pinpointing features of Seagal and his movies.
It is, and one key point is also his running, which seems to decrease in his films. But as we go on, but it's very prevalent in Above the Law, or as it's called, Nico in Europe also.
Yeah, Steven, the propeller hand, Seagal.
Oh my God, how inefficient running can this possibly be? Like, flapping his hands like I mean, Pierce Brosnan may be like overachieving in the running efficiency, but this looks just that's the opposite
It's,
end.
I guess that it gives Seagal more speed. Like he's building up his speed. He has that propeller working for him. Or then it's just a jab at Sean Connery, whose wrist he broke like 3 years before.
Well, that's pretty much above the law for me. Yeah, so the film ends with one of those Steven Seagal-esque, let me educate you on some societal matters.
Yeah, the infamous Seagal monologue,
Yeah, which goes,
which
quote, "Gentlemen, whenever you have a group of individuals who are beyond any investigation, who can manipulate the press, judges, members of our Congress, you're always gonna have within our government those who are above the law."
yeah, and this notion of something being above the law is once again it's something that repeats both in Seagal's films and in Seagal himself.
Yeah, there is always something above, beyond, on, or under in these
Yup,
films.
yup. And the media is always being portrayed as kind of a limp-dicked entity that, like, the relationship that Seagal's films have with the media, it's kind of a weird one. In one way, the movies they rise the media up as media, and this is something that comes more prominent in the later films, but media is someone who questions the corrupt authority, and media is also something that Seagal's characters use to break out their message. But at the same time, media is constantly being blamed for uh, being inefficient, being corrupted itself, being something that the ones in power, quotation marks, are using to brainwash and blindside and manipulate people, like everyday people. So it's kind of Seagal, in one way he makes the case that media is good, and on the other hand he makes the case that media is really bad, and it's just a tool for oppression, and that female reporters are all whores and cocksuckers.
Yeah, and already in his first film, we see this early warning signs that this is a guy who might jump on the wrong bandwagon and start to believe in these conspiracy theories or alternate theories. Where he has now, well, I would say that I would connect this very deeply with the fact that he approves of the annexation of Crimea and has a Russian passport, lives in Russia, and also this on deadly ground monologue at the end where he spouts all this conspiracy nonsense about motors being working with water and whatnot.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we will come back to wrap up Above the Law, but honestly, I don't have much to say about it except that it's one of those dusty looking, cheapo 80s action films. Relatively violent, but things are about to get even more violent.
Yeah, it is one of the 80s action films in quite a lot many senses. Like, once again, the main character here is someone who works on supervising and keeping up the authority. Steven Seagal's character Nico Toscani here is a cop, but he's not just any cop. He's a cop who plays by his own rules. As Seagal does illegal wiretap, goes against his supervisors,
Yeah,
uh, uses unnecessary violence, uses unnecessary threats,
and
and
then
also in a really weird note, and this is something that we also have to get back on later, but is shielding illegal immigrants in US.
yeah, well, that was interesting that both Seagal and the other cop were okaying that, just like that.
Yeah,
but they are the good guys, and
they are the good guys.
they are killing innocent people, or not so innocent people, but just as I mentioned, that Steven Seagal just shoots point blank this one guy because he doesn't like him, and then runs off the scene. And at the end of the day, he is this hero who is defending the law.
Yup. There's also, once again, to keeping up with the 80s action movie vibe, also keeping up with Seagal, there is this kind of actually really badly plotted out conspiracy going on, which is the main plot of the film. Like,
Yeah, and you know what? It's not only those above the law; it's also Steven Seagal who is way above the law here.
yeah, but if Steven Seagal is above the law, that's okay because
It's okay.
it's Steven Seagal. But the whole film kind of circles around the concept of stolen C4. That's the big thing. The original case that Seagal starts to investigate is when he interrupts what he thinks is a drug trade, but turns out is a trade of is a trade of military grade explosives C4.
Yeah.
And you never actually figure out exactly what's the deal with the C4. The film kind of points it out that the CIA is giving C4 to the mafia. But why? CIA's plan in the film is to use C4's charge to kill the senator who is planning on starting an investigation on CIA. But at the same time, CIA, the ones who do the bomb attendance at the senator, those are CIA's own guys. It's the CIA's kill team that also operates on Seagal's territory. So once again, why give C4 to drug dealers? And same way, it's left kind of unexplained what exactly is CIA's part in the drug dealings inside of America. Because
Yeah.
in one way, the film highlights it like it's just one guy, it's Kurt Sagan, who has gone rogue and is smuggling drugs from Vietnam and using the American-based drug dealers to sell them on the streets and taking the profit for that way. But then again, at the closer to the end of the film, when more and more CIA starts to show up and more Seagal's ex-CIA pal starts to show up, the film starts to kind of paint it in the light that the entire CIA is somehow connected to the drug dealings, which also is a conspiracy theory that has been going on quite some time. It's quite prominent conspiracy theory. It's also a theory which apparently perhaps even holds some water, at least in some capacity. But once again, the film makes it really unclear which case is it? Is it Kurt Sagan being one rogue renegade, or is it the CIA entire agency that is mixed up in the drug dealings inside USA?
Yeah, and when it comes to the C4, if you wanted to kill the priest, maybe you could have wanted to use a little bit tidier methods than an explosion in a church and the wider repercussions that are coming from that. Is it now like some religious murder, or what is this case? What are the scoops gonna say?
But these are kind of a hell of a lot of unanswered questions that you are left with at the very end of Above the Law.
Yeah. That is true, but when it comes to complicated plots or plots leaving some things unanswered, just wait for Attack Force. Okay, Under Siege.
Under Siege, often considered perhaps Seagal's best. This is at least his highest grossing film, the one that really broke the bank, and kind of like up until this point, Seagal had been in good light with Warner Brothers as an action star who acts in yet still relatively minor budget made films that make a huge profit when you compare it to the original budget. But Under Siege is kind of like the bank exploder, the money maker for Warner Brothers. This is kind of the moment in Seagal's career when Seagal has enough box office behind him to grant him some power inside the studio, a studio filmmaking machine.
This is essentially Die Hard at sea.
It is, and when it was originally released, that was also the point that many critics raised.
This,
It was often remarked as a Die Hard on a sea or Die Hard on a boat.
the film is also directed by Andrew Davis, as in Above the Law. Cinematography this time by Frank Tidy, I believe it's pronounced Tidy, and he did hundreds of advertisements and worked with Ridley Scott and Tony Scott before they became famous. Screenwriter is J.F. Lawton, writer of, also such gems as Dead or Alive, Under Siege 2.
which is the famous film where there exists the photographic evidence of Steven Seagal groping then 16-year-old Katherine Heigl's breasts, as Seagal is trying to feel out those possible breast cancer lumps.
As one does.
As one does.
And also writer of Pizza Man, the comedy, and Cannibal Woman in the Avocado Jungle of Death. I'm not kidding. That's the title.
It's way better film than the title lets you expect.
I've understood so.
Yep.
Music by Gary Chang. Well, he also did music for Sniper. Under Siege, it's quite brutal and unhinged action, a la Die Hard. Well, essentially, it's a story about pissed off Axl Rose who wants to ruin a birthday party, played by Tommy Lee Jones, and Seagal has to save the day.
Yeah. For Seagal and Saving the Day, Under Siege, as mentioned, it is the highest-grossing Seagal film. It's also the film that basically came after, or Seagal comes from to this film from the kind of notorious 1989 when he tried to impress a female actress by showing her his gun. And also from those out for justice sexual assault allegations, where there was a group of, there was a group allegations from different female assistants from the film crew. 4 women as assistants eventually quit during Out for Justice. 3 of them pressed charges against Seagal for sexual harassment, and those harassment and those suits were eventually settled out of court. There was also, this starts to be the point when people start to take notice that apparently Seagal has the habit of sexually harassing the possible, like auditing female actresses on the casting couch situation. When we now reach Under Siege, Seagal has already netted under his belt several accusations of sexual harassment. Depending on how you count these, we are somewhere perhaps 6 to 9 cases.
Yeah, this was also the last critical and commercial success of Seagal, at least on this scale. Seagal might be at his best when he is not in charge of the picture, as is the case still here.
Also, when he's not the centerpiece of the picture.
Oh yes, because this is, as somebody pointed out, this is very much, this works because it's not only centered on Seagal, that it's also giving the limelight for Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah, it gives a hell of a lot of limelight to Tommy Lee Jones. Seagal, make no mistake, Seagal is the one whose name and face is on the cover, and Seagal is the hero of the film. But technically wise, the film is very much built around Tommy Lee Jones. Tommy Lee Jones is the one that kind of gets most of the trying out different types of things moments in this film. Tommy Lee Jones is the one who gets the most chances to do some acting. Tommy Lee Jones essentially very much also plot-wise is the driving piece of the movie. Most of the plot is being explained through the discourse that Tommy Lee Jones has with the military higher-ups and his old CIA a commander, and not so much by anything that Steven Seagal's character manages to kind of dig up or even understand of the situation in course of the film.
Tommy Lee Jones is kind of the entertainer of the movie, and where I would say Steven Seagal is not necessarily completely hopelessly terrible as an actor. His problem is that he can pull off maybe just about two facial expressions. It's just how Steven Seagal is. So you can't. He's not really made for cinema, really.
No, he isn't. And well, this is not a problem in Under Siege, but this is a problem with Seagal in general. This is something that you actually notice in the very beginning of Above the Law, the very first Seagal film, which is the Steven Seagal kind of a winning combo that he loves to pull out in most of his action films. It usually goes block, block, throw, block, block, throw, block, block, finisher. Like if you watch more than one Steven Seagal action film, if you watch a number of them, you start to pick up that the typical Steven Seagal fight scene is the way. First of all, it's a one-on-one fight, Steven Seagal and the bad guy, and bad guy pulls out a knife or it's a fist fight, or it's something like it's a martial arts situation, and the usual lineup goes that the bad guy attacks, Steven blocks, does a throw, bad guy gets up, attacks again, block, throw, bad guy gets up again, attacks, and block, finisher. The finisher sometimes change. There is, of course, there is some diversity there. Sometimes it's just block, one throw and followed by finisher, or the finisher may change. Sometimes Seagal snaps the guy's neck. Sometimes he throws the guy against the wall. Sometimes he just punches the dude. There is some variation, but the more you look at Steven Seagal action films, the more you start to notice that it's block, throw, throw, block, finisher.
Yeah, now that you mention it.
Yeah, but it's not a problem in Under Siege. That's something that bears to remember. And huge part why that is not the case is that there's actually surprisingly little martial arts in Under Siege.
Yeah, there's a mixture of action here, which is probably for the benefit of the film.
It most definitely is.
And the fact that I think Steven Seagal, for whatever reason, is well directed here in a way that he is able to pull off these one-liners. He has his smile and his certain charm still going on here. When you get to later in his career, it's just kind of still-faced, and you don't get any emotion out of this guy.
Yeah.
The movie starts with and is kind of prevalent and heavy on this 80s style of music to begin a 90s film. So these gated reverb drums and loads of synths. Gated reverb drums, you know, if you have ever listened to any of 80s tracks, they usually have this, you know, this very specific 80s sound that you get here as well. But I would say that there's a lot of pointless scenes abundantly here. For example, weird scenes like keep that Playboy magazine. Of course, there will be loads later, but there are some irritating parts about this film that makes this film feel pretty cheap to me at points. Of course, this is also a personal preference that I'm not too interested in the locale of doing the entire film on a ship. I don't think it's very exciting for the action, but people like to see this. And I think as far as people's commentings go, it seems that 90% of the people actually watch this film because of the tits, and then they shut it off.
I can kind of understand that.
Apparently, this woman actor, who is extremely annoying in this film, by the way, can't bring the name to my head, but plays a minor role in E.T. Yeah, it's a pretty solid film. You have a interesting unhinged baddie, all the communication with the U.S. military, and kind of playing and having fun with that whole situation. And this is exactly what the Under Siege 2 does as well. There's this unhinged maniac on a train who is once again pissed off about something that happened to him. Somebody tried to kill him or something, and now he has this supposed to be like, this pretty crazy video calls with the U.S. military and says that he will kill everybody with military weapons if his demands are not met. Yeah, one of the last lines of the film before we finish is the "Who made you flip like this?" And the bad guy goes, "I got tired of coming up with last-minute desperate solutions to impossible problems created by other fucking people." And I hope that's not your sentiments for me forcing you to do this episode.
No, no, no. It's my sentiment towards you for all the other episodes.
Which ones are those?
Well, I guess the next one.
Oh, yeah. We'll talk about that soon.
But yeah, Under Siege. To kind of keep up with the point that Steven Seagal's movies, at least in our lineup, that they kind of share certain similarities extremely deeply. We are once again dealing with a corrupt and inefficient CIA, and through CIA, the government. This is something that we kind of return back to later on in the episode when we talk about Steven Seagal and the kind of the influences that he has kept with himself outside of the screen. This is also the movie that points out or paints out the military as the more efficient and the less corrupt branch of the government. It's you kind of have once again this split between the governmental branches. You have the intelligence, which is the CIA, which are very much the bad guys, both indirectly and directly through Tommy Lee Jones's character. And then you have the kind of morally good, the branch that kind of holds against the test of character, and that's the military.
Yeah, there is this reference to corruption in the military with quotes like, "We'll just blame it on the cook," absolutely, when they are thinking that everything might be going wrong by the end.
Yeah, but that once again, that plan is made by the main bad guys, CIA handlers.
Yeah. Yeah, once again, quite a violent film. You know what's coming. When Tommy Lee Jones starts the mayhem, he just shoots the leading officer and shoots him directly to the skull. That kind of kickstarts the events here. Very Die Hard style.
Kinda, yeah. Under Siege, essentially, it belongs to the subcategory of action films, which is Die Hard but on X. These were very prominent during the 80s and 90s. That you had a whole bunch of these. You had Die Hard but in White House, Die Hard but in an airplane, Die Hard but in a boat. And when it comes to Die Hard but in X, eh, well, not genre but films. I do think that Under Siege is one of the better, if not even the best.
Okay, I think it starts pretty slow. You kind of know what's coming and you keep on watching, but it takes, what is it, like 25, 30 minutes before we get into the action mode. And once we get to the action mode, shortly after it gets into this pretty tiresome action where it's just Steven Seagal is trying to get rid of the bad guys.
I wasn't so bothered by the action beats of the film, even though this being a Die Hard but in X, they borrow very heavily those from the Die Hard. Like you have the Die Hard has the rooftop explosion of Nakatomi Plaza. In here, you have on deck explosion of the helicopter. In both films, the hero grabs something, a new hose or something, and just jumps over the edge to save himself. You have the shooting down of an aircraft. In here, it was one of the fighter jets. In Die Hard, it's the FBI controlled helicopter.
Yeah.
So of course, when it comes to the action beats, those are kind of heavily borrowed from Die Hard. Didn't really bother me, and I was kind of on board with those. Kind of what was more of a problem to me was once again Seagal himself, who's I get that for action stars of the 90s that the whole stone faced thing was something that was expected of them, but at the same time I kind of get the feeling at times that Seagal is kind of just lazily going through the action. That the first offender on this front, in my opinion, would be the inside the boat gun battle that they have. Like the moment after Seagal has helped bunch of his comrades to escape, and they come face to face with this group of bad guys, and they are all shooting MP5s and uses inside the ship. And that's the moment where Seagal is kind of just sitting on his ass and holding the phone and just
Yeah.
kind of just shooting machine gun with his right hand.
And I was almost about to mention that scene because I think it's one of those most unengaging moments.
It is. It most definitely is the most unengaging moment of the movie. It's also kind of showcases another weak point of the film, which is the whole why exactly are these other people here in this film? Because one way I understand it, of course, it's a boat, and there is supposed to be an entire military group, like it's manned vessel as the bad guys sees it. So of course there is going to be all hands on deck, and now they are all taken prisoners. It makes logic that the film kind of has to at least address the fact that other people are being on the ship, and that they have been taken hostage. This is also something that Die Hard does with the office workers of Nakatomi Plaza. But unlike Die Hard, where John McClane, yeah, sets them free, but they never actually do anything. They just quickly disappear from the film. For some odd reason, Under Siege, and I guess this is because we are dealing with military officials, so that the film kind of have to pay lip service to U.S. Army and showcase that it's not just Seagal that acts, but the entire military can take part in fighting against homegrown terrorism. But I think it's a mistake that Seagal lets his friends out of that one room during the second half of the film, since now the movie is kind of locked in this situation where they have more than one fighting man on the good guy's side, but they can't really use them because this still has to be Seagal's show.
Yeah, the big question is indeed why are they not keeping the camera moving, for example, during the phone call? Why not just keep Seagal running around the corners? But yeah, it's just sitting there on their asses. Somehow,
Yeah.
apparently able to do something. But on Deadly Ground?
Well, yeah, why not? On Deadly Ground, 1994. This infamously is a Steven Seagal film in more ways than one. This is this is the directional debut and exit
Yeah.
of Steven Seagal. At this point, as mentioned, this follows Under Siege 1, which was a huge moneymaker for Warner Brothers. So now, as we mentioned earlier, this is the moment when Seagal has some clout and some mass in the studio circles, and he decides to cash it in. Apparently, the story goes that Seagal, Warner Brothers wanted to do Under Siege 2, and Seagal was laying down the rules that he wouldn't do the film. He wouldn't do Under Siege 2 unless Warner Brothers first let him direct his own movie.
Okay.
And Warner Brothers kind of just to get on Under Siege 2 out of the gates and to be able to monetize that the Under Siege's fame and name, they then decided that they are gonna play ball with Seagal, and they are going to give him still pretty okay budget. This wasn't cheap film to make.
No, judging from the explosions.
Yeah, and the game plan here was that, well, Seagal is such of a known name in the action hero circles at this moment that, the movie is gonna sell itself. And who knows, maybe even, the fact that Steven Seagal himself is directing the movie, that may also bring in, extra cash. So why not? Let's give Steven Seagal a budget. Let's give him the ability to direct. And yeah, as you mentioned earlier, On Deadly Ground is kind of infamous also from the fact that this is, once again, on the growing list of sexual harassment allegations made against Seagal. On Deadly Ground's list, we get the highlights of offering to a female actress to get rid of her ex-husband for $500, and there was some extras harassment that happened. And then there is also the already mentioned rape of a Native American extra
Accusation.
A lot of these are, as they have not, there has not been a court proceedings on a lot of these cases. The story goes that Seagal offered the extra a drive to an after shoot party, like the wrap up party for the movie, and way too late, the extra find out that Seagal had actually driven her to his home, and the only party would be happening in Seagal's pants.
Yeah. On other departments, cinematography by Rick Waite did Red Dawn, the 1984 version. Screenwriters are Ed Horowitz, who wrote Exit Wounds, and Robin O. Rossen, who is the director of When I Sing. He doesn't have a lot of credits on his resume, but When I Sing is this quite recent 2018 romantic comedy based on real events. Music by Basil Polidoris. He is kind of a heavyweight. He scored Red Dawn, 1984, Conan the Barbarian, RoboCop, The Hunt for Red October, Free Willy, Les Miserables, and so on. Okay, so Steven Seagal here is playing a person who seems to grow a conscience against a oil tycoon and then destroys the company. And that's okay, because he did it for the environment.
Yeah, Seagal does a whole bunch of stuff for the environment in On Boring Ground. This kind of, if you would have to summarize the films in one sentence, this would be the film where Seagal fucks a gilf and is then born again as a spirit bear.
Yeah, that part. It goes into this mystical world. It's grazing all of the possible cliches of the Native Americans, that there's a lot of magic involved, and we believe in these things, and therefore you're that, and we see you as this. And
yeah, this is kind of a retracing the whole thing that we already touched upon this notion in Pocahontas episode, but the whole concept of native people being people who are magically in tune with nature, painting the colors of the wind, as Pocahontas puts it. And on that ground, oh my god, if this film doesn't waste like 5 years of running time to make this point to you.
Yeah, this is so awkward when you know that Steven Seagal seems to be. Steven Seagal is interested in many things Native American, and this is supposed to be some kind of a positive representation of the Native Americans, but oh boy, it goes awfully wrong.
Yeah, and something that makes that even kind of a more sad is the fact that this is the time period, as already mentioned. There's a whole concept of identity being made up concept, and Seagal being the example. This is the moment when Seagal's identity was that of a Native American man, or he at least thought himself to be one. And that's also something that is very prominently in your face throughout the film. That there's a hell of a lot of this Native American that, Native American this, Native Americans 8, oil workers 0 type of stuff.
Yeah, this basically that he is kind of the defending force of minorities or certain groups. Here he is kind of the defender of the Native Americans, and I think it's a theme that repeats in many of his films. In Fire Down Below, for example, he is the defender of a small town, this poor small town that he is out to make right and make it get rid of this marijuana and toxic waste mafia. All of these bar fights, that's what does it take to change the essence of a man? And
God damn, I hated that gimmick in this film.
that was
Like in here, Seagal's gimmick is the fact that he asked the same question kind of twice. Like he asks a half a question at first, and then he follows up with the whole question. Like, what does it take? What does it take to change the essence of a man? How much? How much money is enough? How low? How low can your box office performance sink?
This is definitely a moment that I very much remember from Steven Seagal's films. This bar scene. What does it take to change the essence of a man? You first have this full blown ruckus inside the bar. He's destroying the entire bar, and then has this real little game of chicken in the with the worst offender of this group who is mistreating this Native American. And Steven Seagal comes to save the day. And what does it take to change the essence of a man? Suddenly the film's mood and the music and everything changes, and he changes his approach. This bad guy, he says, "I need time. I need time to change."
And Seagal follows. I need to. But since you brought up the bar fight scene, I think that bar fight scene, when talk about on that ground, it's kind of one of the key scenes if you want to point out many of the film's failings, just using one example, because there's a lot that goes wrong in on deadly ground, and a lot of it just comes together kind of beautifully in the bar fight scene. You have the whole folks spirituality, the wise sage shit that Seagal tries to pull out here. You have the whole Native Americans go empowering thing with Seagal very clearly in bar fight scene identifying himself as a Native American, and having these Native Americans 8, oil workers 0 lines. You have the oppression of Native Americans, as there is the obviously evil bully who takes his bullying to the second degree. You have the whole blindness of Seagal to his own actions, as at the end of as during the hand slap scene, Seagal himself turns into a even more violent bully. and now bullying eventually leads into a spiritual enlightenment or some shit like that. And then Seagal does the whole 180 and actually is now himself being condescending against the Native American man, as the scene ends with Native American man pointing out that Seagal is gonna go into a long journey and it's good for all humanity, and Seagal just remarks, "Yes, sure, yeah,
Yeah, what
you
was
you
that?
yeah, you crazy savage."
The delivery was such that I got definitely this condescending tone, but
It is condescending. It's a condescending ending to a scene whose main point was not to be a condescending against Native Americans.
but god damn it, it doesn't make any sense because then there is this casual killing of a bear as part of the rituals that makes him kind of the bear figure that he's supposed to
Yeah.
be to challenge the oil company. He's casually has this kind of a clearly a quite a long training session with the old man, the wise man from this Inuit community or whichever tribe they are of Native Americans.
Yeah, I guess they are supposed to be Inuits.
Yeah.
In here, it's really it's hard to tell because the film itself doesn't know where it's actually taking place.
And I gotta say that Michael Caine's reference, although he is the bad guy, but he constantly referring to them as the goddamn Eskimos, got a little bit uncomfortable too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he casually kills the bear, has this whole training session, has some kind of a holy bath, and then he's ready to go on his mission finally, and has recuperated from his wounds.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just a couple of scenes later, he is in a shack with this Native American girl who asks Seagal's character, "Haven't you learned anything from my father?" And he responds, "Do you really think that this hocus pocus spirit stuff is gonna help us now?" But really, after he went through all that hocus pocus prepping,
Yeah, and after Seagal himself being like go hocus pocus, like all throughout the film, as Seagal like before his spiritual path, Seagal also has his own hocus pocus made up nonsense lingo moment when he's like, "I'm not a bear, I'm a mouse, hiding from the hawks in the house of Raven."
yeah,
I'm like, oh my god, who wrote this?
right? And why Raven? I don't know of the symbolism of the animals and everything, but and then actually the Raven part is a central piece of the story, or the film ends with the Raven theme.
But then again, that all kind of points ties down with something that I felt was really surprising with On Deadly Ground, because I got the feeling that this is a movie that is really unsure of itself, or Seagal is really unsure of himself, which kind of goes extremely hard against his tough guy, not afraid of anything, ego or attitude or image he tries to portray constantly, because On Deadly Ground wastes no effort in order to kind of paint Seagal's side of the argument. Seagal himself is painted here as the ultra macho, ultra cool guy. That the bad guys are so villainous that it's downright comedical. But the biggest and weirdest problem here is the post edit ADR, in which the background noises they start to play lip service to Seagal, almost like Seagal is so unsure of himself now that he's a director that he even has to make up dialogue just to get some confidence, because this is something that also drives me nuts in many of the scenes. You have these off-screen yells. Forest is here. That fire is almost as good as down. Or in the bar fight scene where there's like constantly these, "Oh shit, kick their ass, Forest." "Go Forrest Go," or in that Jennings press release scenes where there are these off-screen reporters yelling stuff like "That's a crock of shit," and nobody believes you. Stop lying to us.
Yeah.
And the film does this like all the fucking time, and I kind of can't understand exactly how Seagal, that the man who built his entire career by being the tough guy in Hollywood, how all of a sudden he's so afraid and he's so unsure of himself. Or is it just the case that he feels that the audience is so stupid that everything has to be kind of be handheld to them? Like you need the "That's a crock of shit" yells during the Jennings press conference because the dumbasses in the audience can't piece it together that Jennings is the bad guy and he's lying to the press.
There is a lot of this self-promotion as well to kind of lift Seagal up as the star, which most clearly starts in On Deadly Ground with quotes like, "Just who the hell is this guy? Just who the fuck is he?" And note, there's a hell of a lot of cursing in this film. "Who is he? You want to know who he is? Try this. Delve down into the deepest bowels of your soul. Try to imagine the ultimate fucking nightmare, and that won't come close to this son of a bitch when he gets pissed." End quote. So there is this promotional line material, something that happens also in Under Siege 2 and many others. This moment of promotion for Steven Seagal's ability to kick ass.
Yeah, and on that record, actually, On Deadly Ground goes once again the extra mile.
Yes, it does.
Because, yeah, at the very end of the film, you have Arlie Ermey's character, who is Stone, the leader of the mercenaries that Jennings hires to get rid of Seagal. And Ermey has like a whole load of these scenes where he pays lip service to towards Seagal. It starts when they, well, once again use the cliche that Seagal is a secret badass. Now they find out that Seagal doesn't have a background except starting from a certain year, which they quickly piece together that means that Seagal is quote unquote the company. What the company is this time, it's left undisclosed, but can be CIA, can be NSA, can be whatever. But Seagal is from the company before he moved to a private sector. And following from this point, Ermey starts to have like this, you could drop this guy in the middle of an ice storm, and in 2 days he would come back with fistful of pesetos and a hooker or something like that. And there's like a whole bunch of this stuff in On Deadly Ground. In my opinion, way more than there was in Above the Law or in Under Siege.
Yeah, this is essentially the movie where Steven Seagal is starting to be more in control of his career. Mostly, this is unfortunate, it seems, because of these kind of thematical failures and or the tacked on speech at the end that originally, according to some sources, ran for 30 to 40 minutes. Jesus on a cross.
Yeah, that's also something like the Seagal monologue at the end, which closes the film. It's infamous as it is, as it runs way too long. But the often not disclosed fact is that the producers at Warner Brothers, they had to get on their knees and beg Seagal to trim it down, because apparently originally it was going like infinitely longer.
Yeah, now it's like 8-10 minutes. Still extremely long.
Something like that. Way too long, and once again, way too ham-fisted. Seagal kind of does once again the thing where he paints the entire picture what he wants to say extremely clear to the audience, kind of a spoon feeding the message to you. This is also something that happens with the film's symbolism.
Yeah, and it's bringing a lot. It's just shortly mentioning a lot of things that you could expand on, but he obviously doesn't. He just mentions that yeah, there could be electric or magnetic engines, and they can practically run forever, and you don't know about them because if they were coming to use, they'd put the oil companies out of business, and you get the gist. And this goes on and on and on.
And since we already mentioned the whole Seagal going off the deep end and down with the crazy path, and this showing up in his films, I guess On the Crowd it's not the last example of this, or it's not the last example of Steven Seagal's paranoid rabbit hole that he eventually falls down. But it perhaps is the best example. We get more of this in the in Attack Force, and well, to an infinitely lesser degree, but perhaps also in Outside of Law, but in Beyond the Law. But On the Ground is perhaps the most clearest example. In On the Ground, we already once again we raise again the whole point that media is lying to people, and everything is being controlled by the shadowy elite. Steven Seagal himself turns into some type of eco-terrorist who has been stockpiling weapons and explosives for years before the film even starts, because he has been preparing for a moment when he alone has to go against in a war against an entire nation, essentially. So he is some kind of a violent renegade or rebel, or at least prepping out to be one. And what's kind of noticeable here is that, well, Seagal has other business ventures outside of movies, as we often do. Seagal also is 2 CD recording or artist. He had Steven Seagal's Lightning Bolt, the energy drink. He's also a one-time prolific author who wrote the book The Way of the Shadow Wolves, or perhaps they didn't write so much. It's once again it's a combination piece of two authors, Seagal being one of them and the other being Tom Morrissey.
Yeah, it's because apparently martial artist has to be a jack of all trades in art.
Apparently so, but you actually you kind of know, if you follow Seagal's other ventures, like his music and his books, you kind of get this closing circle when it comes to Steven Seagal, the crazy man. Because in the you never guess who is the bad guy in his book, The Way of the Shadow Wolves. Like take a wild guess. Now we have had the CIA already kind of twice. Now we have oil companies. What could it be? Steven Seagal's debut book. He has to have a bad guy.
Yeah, well, what could it be? The gas companies?
No. I'm. It's, and I'm not shitting you. It's the entire goddamn deep state. And the whole plot of The Way of the Shadow Wolves is kind of a like Cliff Notes version of the Q conspiracy up until something like 2014. So Biden stealing Trump's votes doesn't quite make it into the deep state conspiracy plan in Seagal's book, but you have all of the rest. Like you have the president and FEMA, NSA, CIA, all conspiring together to use Mexican drug cartels to smuggle into USA 500 plus some that they have smuggled already previously before the book starts, jihadists, which they are going to arm with explosive devices so that they can have like massive terrorist incident inside of USA. And this is the conspiracy that Seagal has to face against. And once again, the the bad guys, the shadowy cabal, which, well, if you read behind the lines, is the true masterminds are, of course, the Jews, not mentioned directly, but it's kind of hinted at. But the tools of the real heads of the cabal, once again, is the fake news media and also the evidence of a pedophilic crimes against those in power. So
Yeah.
that's kind of at the end of a day where we close off with Seagal. And when you look at it, when you look at Seagal's films from Above the Law, especially on Deadly Ground, you can kind of see how this madness just builds inside of him.
Yeah,
It
that's
starts on Above the Law. CIA is bad, and it's a shadowy elite that operates above the law. They are involved in drug trade. They are doing cooperation with criminals. On Deadly Ground, the media is once again lying to you, and now it's bigger than ever. Now the oil companies also are in the mix, and you have to stockpile ammunitions and weapons in case you have to go against, start a war against the country. And it's just like, in his book, it finally caps up with pedophiles and the president of the United States smuggling jihadists into America and arming them with explosive devices.
it looks like Steven Seagal went really off the deep end into the Pizzagate. I suppose US Securities and Exchange Commission are also the list of possible targets for his future novels, since in 2020 he he failed to disclose the payments he received for promoting an ICO, an initial coin offering for cryptocurrency called Bitcoin to Gen.
Oh yeah, that mess up.
And he was promised 250k in cash and then 750k in those useless tokens. And this violated the federal security laws that they're publicly supporting this coin. I don't know who the hell would take advice of Steven Seagal regarding cryptocurrency, but yeah, that's what they tried.
I guess Putin.
I guess Putin. So Seagal paid a fine of $157,000 plus some other expenses. Fire Down Below, 1997, our next film directed by Felix Enriquez Alcalá in his theatrical debut, and he has made a long career in TV. Credits include some episodes of CSI, SEAL Team, Stargate, Terminator, Sarah Connor Chronicles, etc. Screenwriters are Jeb Stewart and Philip Morton, so pretty big names because Jeb Stewart co-wrote Die Hard and The Fugitive. And music by Nick Glennie Smith. He's a frequent collab with Hans Zimmer, has had his hands on in some capacity in The Lion King and The Rock. Yeah, he did the score for The Lion King 2, Home Alone 3, and We Were Soldiers as examples. In Fire Down Below, we have the EPA agent Steven Seagal and fighting against a sort of a corrupt and poor hillbilly town. So what we have here is Steven Seagal arrives to the town and he's investigated a toxic waste dump into a river. Throughout this film, it's a complete mystery still to me what this toxic waste dump is all about, where this toxic waste dump is coming from, but apparently their business is to deal with toxic waste dump and just dump it into the river because they're the bad guys, And on top of that, they have some marijuana fields in this town, but apparently it has nothing to do with the aforementioned toxic dump waste, because as far as I know, marijuana doesn't create toxic dumps or toxic waste. So Steven Seagal is more in control. He's a producer of the film. This film is infamous for sped up fight scenes. He was late for his shoots once again. It has a kind of a really ham-fisted love story in it where Steven Seagal or his character has to constantly kind of prove himself to this lady that, yeah, he wants to be with this girl, and it's not only for his mission in the town. And of course, being the good guy that he is, he takes her as his girlfriend at the end. There are some pretty hilarious moments in that where the lady notices the honey buckets in the car that she wasn't able to buy because she's out of money. So he bought those honey buckets for her. So somehow, even though Seagal's character still hasn't even mentioned that he bought those honeys for her, supposedly, she gets excited when she sees them on the back of the car, resulting in the fact that she wants to further develop this relationship between them. And then there's this crazy brother of hers who has tried for her entire life to convince her of the fact that she would be somehow mentally disturbed and that she would have killed her father, their father. But as it turns out, it's the brother that killed the father. He's the crazy person and is trying to manipulate the lady into believing something that didn't happen. And that has made the lady very socially awkward and doesn't really connect with people, doesn't have friends. But Seagal is here to fix that.
Fire Down Below, of course, once again, to keep a tap on Seagal's dealings off screen. This is the film that comes off after Seagal has refused to choose Jenny McCarthy to Under Siege 2 as the female lead, since Jenny McCarthy refused to expose her breasts to Seagal in a casting couch situation. And Fire Down Below itself being kind of famous for the fact that Seagal once again allegedly kicked off a female actress after the said actress had refused to do a private line reading rehearsal at Seagal's flat.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, the main lady here being Mark Helgenberg. I don't know exactly who of the ladies of the Fire Down Below finally agreed to rehearse lines alone with Seagal in his apartment, but yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, Steven.
There might be some of the most heinous lines in this film out of the ones that we have looked into. For example, when he goes to the town market or something, and that there is this two beautiful ladies, of course, at the desk selling items, and they say to Seagal, kind of looking interested at Seagal. They say to him that here's your change and you can come back and see us. And then Seagal responds, I'm gonna do that. Two beautiful twins like you. Mm-hmm. Gets a man thinking. What the
fuck? Fucking God, Seagal.
Pretty on your face.
Oh,
can you get
God.
any more obvious? And slimy. Yeah, that happens. And also happens is the Seagal whispery is getting completely out of control here. He gets Seagal's getting really super whispery here, so I can't hear many of his lines anymore. I had to put the subtitles on, and it gets even more worse when he refuses to do his own ADR in the 2000s.
Yeah, and Fire Down Below doesn't even like from the two ecosystem-centric action films, this one and On Deadly Ground, Fire Down Below doesn't even get the plus that On Deadly Ground had, which is the fact that the film correctly identified USA as a third world country. But that's at least On Deadly Ground, that was honesty that I could appreciate.
Yeah, I feel that Fire Down Below is overlong, and maybe the events are not so effective because there isn't some kind of main events that happen throughout the film. I feel that it's just step by step Steven Seagal is destroying this toxic waste dump boss, and he's empire. So this is essentially Steven Seagal and the town lady against the toxic waste dump big boss who lives outside of the hillbilly town somewhere in a fancy office in the middle of center somewhere. And then his son has to visit this toxic waste dump leader every now and then because they are unable to control Steven Seagal's character in the town. So finally, after a lot of persuasion, the big boy himself comes to the hillbilly town to meet Seagal. And it's not a meeting of amicable terms, so of course this crime mafia leader then sends more baddies on his way, but with same results. Oh yeah, this other remarkably incomprehensible moment of this lady who gets super excited about those honey buckets in the car. Later on in this film, she gets really excited about the gun that is visibly on site near the pedals of the car when Seagal himself sends the girl to grab something from the car for fixing the porch. And instead of being kind of intimidated by that, being scared by that, she's next like, well, I think you are worthy of a relationship. So essentially, next she suggests that maybe they should have like a supper and see where it goes. But I guess in a hillbilly town, whoever holds the gun is the one to go on a date with. All in all, I think it's one of the more entertaining films of the films that we will be tackling tonight, for better or worse.
Well, speaking of worse, would that then be Attack Force? Our take on the 2000s of Seagal. This being from 2006, just 4 years before Steven Seagal's Volume and all the shit that went down behind the scenes of his reality show.
Yeah, so jumping into his direct-to-video career that started roughly in 2003, when the film with Ja Rule, Half Past Dead, tanked in the box office. This started this about 20 years now running and doing these direct-to-video films. Attack Force is directed by Michael Keusch. TV and film director collaborated with Seagal on some of his other hits too, as like Shadow Man 2006 and Flight of Fury 2007. Cinematography is by Sonja Rom, some German cinematographer. Screenwriters Joe Halpin and Seagal himself. Halpin is a TV writer, has lately been doing the TV show FBI. Music by Barry Taylor. He composed all the Michael Keusch Seagal movies, and other than that, he has 3 other soundtrack credits, but looks like he threw this keyboard out of the window after 2007. The tagline or the plot outline on IMDb baffles me because I have a kind of a different outline for this film, but I'm not surprised given the confusion level of this film. But IMDb states, quote, "When aliens arrive on Earth to harvest human DNA, a special agent is assigned to destroy them without letting the public know they exist," unquote.
Yeah. Then again, on EMDB's defense, nobody, even the film, can quite actually understand what it is all about.
No, my summarization is roughly that Commander Marshal Lawson is saddened by the execution of his team, and then he hunts down a group of weirdos who think a DNA-altering drug called the CTX that turns you into a killing machine has some street value.
Yeah, and once again we have also the corrupt government. This time it's through some kind of a really hidden. I don't even know what organization. Essentially, in Attack Force there is an organization called Majestic, which operates like it's some branch of government. Like, for example, our main hero Steven Seagal, who is, well, at least by his title, is a member of military. He works for Majestic. So Majestic would kind of have to be some branch of the government. It's a super secret one, and one that even the film doesn't understand what it does and what is its function. But there it is, and Majestic for some reason wants to push the film's kind of a made up super soldier drug into the street market.
Yeah, this is kind of one of those mid 2000s Hellraiser films which has been filmed for cheap in Romania, while it pretends to be happening in France, I suppose, because of this heavy French accent guys.
Yeah, this is kind of also the film where everybody, absolutely everybody, is trying to figure out what to do with Steven Seagal and well, essentially what to do with Seagal's now starting direct video career. Like the cinematographer is trying to figure out how to hide the fact that Seagal has gotten fat, and you see attempts at camera tricks that later become more prominent in Seagal's direct-to-video films. They haven't yet mastered it out here, but you see attempt. You see attempt from the ADR department what to do with Seagal when he refuses to do his own post-credit ADR. Haven't quite figured it out yet, but there's an honest attempt. You see an attempt from Steven Seagal's body doubles. How are we exactly going to showcase ourselves in front of the camera to hide the fact that it's not Seagal? Haven't quite mastered that one yet. There is way too many side profiles, which are really obvious, but it's an attempt. Seagal himself tries to figure out exactly how few shits he anymore gives. Hasn't quite mastered that yet. He actually appears surprisingly a lot in this film, but at least his appearances are the late stage extremely lazy Steven Seagal. I'm just gonna sit down in this one room and do my lines type of deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that you barely even see any fighting even when they are fighting, it's cut in such a way that you can't make heads or tails of the action.
Yeah, and a few unfortunate shots of fighting that actually showcase you something that they haven't edited they haven't completely ruined in editing, where you see that Seagal actually really like honest to God, Seagal himself still throws a punch. You can actually see that's really a lazy punch.
Yeah.
Like there's no more even the Seagal block throw thing going on. It's just like raises arm, hits bad guy type of deal. I haven't seen like this is absolutely, this is some of the laziest fist fighting that I've seen in action movies.
Yeah, grabs the attack and then tries to do a throw or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like you said, it seems that the theme has been got like pants down in the editing booth that, oh, Steven Seagal is not going to do any ADR for this movie, so we just have to get some guy and just dub the parts that we weren't able to capture at the location.
Yeah, get me someone to do Seagal's lines.
And he doesn't sound anything
director,
like Seagal.
I don't sound anything like Seagal. It's not a problem. Just say the fucking dialogue.
Yeah.
And what makes it even more worse in Attack Force is that, well, apparently Seagal also hadn't managed to figure out exactly how much he's gonna mumble yet. So his dialogue is a weird mixture. There are parts, and this is something that changes in mid sentence, in mid dialogue, in one fucking scene with Steven Seagal. You have parts of Seagal saying his own lines. Those are the ones that they have through some miracle apparently managed to capture on set using the boom mic. Those are left in the film like as they are, you notice that that's Seagal's voice, and then in mid sentence it cuts to the other guy,
Yeah, it's so
and
distracting you can't follow anything.
it is like Seagal, not Seagal, not Seagal, not now it's Seagal once again.
And there is something about the cinematography that, again, we have a lot of close-ups of everything, but you hardly see the locations very well. Just you get a little bit claustrophobic with the camera in this film. I don't know if we can blame the cinematographer, but it's so direct to TV bullshit looking.
It's kind of the once again it's the case, and this is something that we also noticed in the direct-to-video Hellraiser sequels, but there is this kind of idea that by post edit fast and zooms and extreme close-ups and having this weird trailing effect as you move the camera put there on post edit, it somehow is supposed to bring energy.
It just makes it look even more cheap.
It does, but for some reason, a lot of these extremely cheaply direct-to-video films, that they have a tendency to do this. I can partly at least try to comprehend the logic behind this in action movies, where it is that like the movie is supposed to move by fast. It is called an action movie. There is supposed to be action, and if your script doesn't have enough action, doesn't have enough fighting, I can kind of understand this. It's a wrong decision, but the decision at to try in the editing booth to put some like fake actiony spirit.
To add excitement that is not there.
Yeah, yeah. You said it very well. To put excitement that is not there into the film.
There's a Seagal advertisement time in this film too. One line that some character says about, there's two things to know about him. He's a bad motherfucker, and he's a bad motherfucker.
Yeah, yeah. Thankfully, this time though it's been left with just that one notion.
And this odd notion of calling people that are younger than Seagal as children or some other term like young man. And this is something that happens in Beyond the Law as well. I don't know. I think Steven Seagal likes to call other people children.
It might once again be some kind of a compensating effect going on. Seagal knows that he's not getting any younger. He barely through I don't know what hair pieces he uses, but he managed to become less balding than he was in Above the Law. But he can't turn back the clock. He's not getting any younger physically. So I guess this not the tendency that we now see that Seagal addresses everybody younger than him as children is some kind of a like compensating effect. He does that to bring the other actors or the characters down by referring them to them as children, making him the adult.
CTX bottles are at the hotel where the military bodies are spending time with this dangerous woman. But the CTX bottles are not the reason that the so-called children died. But it's a fucking blade. It's about these blades, and then there is this drug that they need to get rid of. And then there are these alien eyes because of it manages to
The
modify her
CTX
DNA.
mutation.
Yeah.
I guess the eyes are where the IMDb's notion that these are aliens comes from.
Yeah, never made in the film, this notion.
No, but then again, the eyes are never explained. Like the film makes a specific point to showcase you that the CTX users have weird set of eyes. They have like it's that Men in Black thing where the rooftop alien who jumps from the rooftop at the very beginning of the film when Will Smith's character tries to arrest him. He has like the second set of eyelids. There's like two blinks that happen. And Attack Force uses the exact same trick. The CTX users have two sets of eyelids, and why that is never explained. CTX itself as a truck is not really explained. There is some notion that it's supposed to be some kind of a gene altering master race making chemical, which could partly explain why Majestic and through Majestic the government would be interested in it, like creating super soldiers or something like that. But what exactly are the effects of the drug are never made clear. In fact, when they talk about the drug, what they mostly just mention is the fact that it somehow it puts its users into a berserker mode. That's supposed to be the excuse for the killing of the three guys from Seagal's team in the hotel room. The lady from the nightclub just couldn't help herself because she's a CTX user. So when she gets more adrenaline, or when her adrenaline spikes, she becomes a mindless killing machine.
Yeah, because usually when you go to a bar and somebody's offering you drugs, well, I know personal experience though, but the thing how it's supposed to go is that the sales pitch goes something like this: that oh, you will feel so connected with the universe and you'll love everybody and will see life differently for the rest of your days and it will change you for the better. But here the sales pitch, I guess, is that oh well, when you're gonna take CTX, you're going to turn into a mindless killing machine who will take pleasure of murdering people. Oh yeah, I'm gonna have that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But then again, Karri, in movies' defense, it's not just any bar. It's the bar that is being run by the ex-biochemist who now is a nightclub runner because, I don't know, reasons.
And of course, this all means that the street value of CTX is you don't wanna know levels.
Yeah. But it's not too valuable stuff or chemical that you couldn't just pump it into, I guess, France's water supply, just so that you can make everybody a psychotic junkie.
Right. This is not a very original plot. It's just that's just the fact. It's hard to kind of grasp who would want to get more of that, except kind of against their will. Give me more of that shit so I can kill some more buggers. Oh well.
It's by no means it's not original plot, but it's somehow it's a plot that somehow manages to still make itself absolutely incoherent. And
Oh
I
boy.
can't figure out how you can how you can achieve that feat with a storyline that is so unoriginal and when you really look at it, so bare bones.
Yes, there are so many points where you are kind of clueless of people's motivations or what was this. You know, I care for you. I know, me too. And then Steven Seagal's character and this attractive-looking lady agent hug. Just a few minutes later, of course, she dies. That's supposed to be drama. But there was no previous indication of anything that they would have been interested in each other. Then there is this one town where these bad guys are supposed to go, so we go to this town and you know firefight ensues. I don't know if they were mobilizing Romanian army for this scene or what, but they have some military gear here going on, and then they are like, yeah, let's go to the church, and that's where the action happens in the church. Then they go to some cellars. Is it of the church? And that's where like the big part of the end battle happens. First is like now it's just for just 10 minutes of checking people's eyes whether they have taken the CTX, and if yes, then shoot them immediately. And then entering and exiting churches, and then one team, A team, goes to the left and B team goes to the right. Very exciting, right? And then it's just 15 minutes of walking in dim cellars.
Yeah. Which finally concludes with everybody dead except Seagal and some random team member who is left wounded. And
Yeah. Like there were so many boring fights and tons of boring cuts and boring action. At least there's Seagal and this cute Asian survives. At least this is an important note to end upon.
yeah, like the film literally ends with Seagal, well, not even carrying, but holding the Asian guy's hand as the film tries to argue that Seagal is carrying him out of the church, and they run in slow-mo and they get off screen and end credits.
Yeah.
And during that slow-mo run, I goddamn love this scene because during it, thanks to the fact that they for some reason they filmed it in slow motion, you can actually see the pained grin in Seagal's face as he has to run. But then again, it's still like this is 2006, and we get to 2020 with our last film, 2019.
Yeah.
2019. So this is still a film where Seagal runs. Like if nothing else, at least he still runs, and he still can actually run relatively well. I mean the other take, like post 2000s take where I've seen Seagal run this fast, would be 2018 when Seagal ran out on interview when he was being questioned about all that sexual harassment.
Yeah, so we jump 13 years later and we will see if anything has changed in his career. Beyond the Law is directed by James Cullen Brasek, who directed maybe most notoriously Hate Crime. This is a film that was banned in the UK by the BBFC, which is the story of a Jewish family which is being terrorized at their home by neo-Nazis. Yeah. And Brasek is coming from a family of artists. Cinematography is by David Newbert and Alex Brendea. Brendea directed a documentary called Profu/Teach, which is about an unconventional teacher who holds private lectures. Released in 2017, screenwriters are Chad Law and Johnny Walters. Chad Law is mainly a writer of low-grade action films, such as this one. Music by Charlie Wilkins. So, another Steven Seagal and rap artist collaboration.
Yeah.
DMX is in this, as he was in Exit Wounds.
Yep.
And he just recently died of a heart attack, just a couple of months before we record this, caused possibly by a drug overdose. But there's a close family member that has stated that DMX took the COVID vaccine, and after that he got the heart attack. So, of course,
that can't mean anything good, knowing that he was acquainted with Seagal. I smell a second novel coming.
But that went completely into the vaccine blame game. Anyway.
But yeah, this is one of the last movie appearances by DMX. So yeah, this is, I guess, Seagal somehow managed to become even more fatter for Beyond the Law. And for some odd reason, it appears that even Seagal's stunt voice actors have now decided to try to emulate the Seagal mumble speak.
Seriously? There were other dudes ADRing in this one? I didn't notice though.
Well, I'm fairly certain that there actually are.
Probably.
I can't confirm, but that's kind of my gut impression.
Mm-hmm. There's actually a notion of there being Steven Seagal stunt doubles in, was it Attack Force or Beyond the Law? But yeah, so...
Well, basically all Steven Seagal's, like the late phase, Steven Seagal films, they are ridden with stunt doubles. Beyond the Law, actually, perhaps being the rare exception, I didn't notice Seagal stunt doubles. Then again, this is also the film where
Mm-hmm.
Seagal walks exactly twice in the entire film.
Was it? Yeah. Yeah, he mainly sits and is trying to be kind of condescending to his son character.
Yeah, this also being one of the movies where Seagal once again plays the bad guy. Something that is really rare to see from Seagal. Seagal almost like systematically refuses to be the bad guy in the film. Of course, in this case also the being the bad guy comes with a certain grain of salt, as Seagal is the mob boss who seems to be against crime, most definitely seems to be against murder, and spends the entire film to talk to his son like you have to go legit and you shouldn't do crime and you shouldn't do murder, and the fact that his son is a criminal seems to be like a real touchy point for Seagal.
Yeah, kind of a contradiction there inside the family. How to pull these two sides at the same time. But yeah, that's what he wants his son to do, and at this at the end, kind of does a 180 and says that, well, I think, talking to this police or ex-police whose son got murdered, which is the big plot point of the film, says, well, I think it was your fault that he died after all, and not my son's fault who actually killed him. And also in this film we have absolutely absurd moments of dialogue, which I can't understand. Which was this really meant to be what you get from at face value, or what is this, like Seagull going, I need to clean my house, so how about we do stuff tomorrow, okay?
Yeah, yeah, in the middle of a drug deal that is supposed to be a big deal for his gangster boss self.
Oh my god, I had to rewind and check. Seriously?
Yeah,
Apparently no much respect for victims, because the boy's grave in this film is like a dog's grave, but I guess that comes with the whole dealing with drug cartels or mafias or cartels, so you can't be laid to rest at the official graveyards, so you get a dog's grave. Yeah, DMX also plays the bad guy here, who is like the town cop who is playing along with the mafia.
yeah. This one falls back. Well, actually, is kind of a surprising take. We are once again we are dealing with a corrupt branch of the government. This time it's the police force. But what is surprising is that up until this point, that the kind of the culprits have been CIA and, well, whatever Majestic was supposed to be.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, nobody knows. The film doesn't even know itself. Of course, when it comes to Seagal's filmography, this is not the first time that the crooked cops are kind of brought into the mix. For example, the entire plot of Exit Wounds revolved around police corruption
Mm.
and rotten cops. But from our lineup, this is actually this is the first case that the police force is actually being shown to be the bad guys.
Yeah, they lose the supplier, who I suppose is supposed to be the boy that they kill in the beginning, and who has nothing to do with the disappearance of the money, because it's been taken by this stripper lady who is supposed to be in love with the boy that got killed. Anyway, they get the new supplier, Karina, this very sure of herself looking lady with this gazy eyes and all that Seagal's mafia character can muster to say is something about, okay, you're the new supplier, so I don't know, how's the volume? It's good, okay, so everything's good. Let's get on with our plans. Pretty awkward dialogue.
A pretty awkward dialogue, also pretty awkward Seagal. Like, the man he looks downright sickly
Mm.
in some scenes of these films. Like, I don't know if this is just a bad makeup department or if he really has health problems at this stage. But boy, oh boy, does it sure does look like that. But there's also something weird going on with Seagal's ego, as you notice in the scene that takes place on the firing range, where for some reason Seagal's character can't even, be pretending to be firing any kind of a long at any kind of a long distance target.
Mm.
The target in the shooting range being exactly in Seagal's face.
Yeah, if not sickly, he seems kind of really bored of making these films. And as you made the notions that he tried to move on from his action adventures, and now he's kind of changing it in the 2010s, as we talked about. Now he's not in the lead. Actually, there's another guy in the lead, this ex-policeman, who is out for a revenge for the people who murdered his son, even though he apparently wasn't too close to the son anyway. But yeah, goes on this little kill trip. And yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, Siegel seems really that he's just there to collect a paycheck, and he's quite sick of this whole thing. And has gotten some feedback about the fact that he is not playing the lead parts really anymore. But then in the marketing department, of course, he's billed as the supposed to be the lead character. But you're up for disappointment on that department.
yeah. Then again, that is also the case of today's Bruce Willis. There's something that goes with these old action stars these days, where I would say only the golden ones, like Stallone's and Schwarzenegger's, still see the effort that they actually still play the leads in their new action movies. And then you have this second set of characters like Seagal, like Bruce Willis, who yeah, sell their name so that the film can get a top billing with them. Like Bruce Willis's face will be on the front cover, and his name will be there. Bruce Willis in X. Steven Seagal's face is on the forefront, and at the upper end of the case, you have Steven Seagal in Beyond the Law, and then when you see the film itself, you have like 5 minutes, and he's just some kind of a really small minor part where you can easily tell that he hasn't even seen the trouble to show up on the shooting location, except for the close-ups.
Not quite as hideous film at all, like as Attack Force, but still nowhere near any kind of a masterpiece.
No. This most definitely this is better than Attack Force, but this is still extremely lackluster outing, and it is somewhat surprising to see that Seagal is so lazy, so not giving a fuck here, because once again, this is kind of the moment where Seagal could have attempted to play a dramatic part. His character, a criminal mob boss father, who wants to his son go straight and is disappointed with his kind of a douchey B-class criminal son, tries to correct him but can't, tries to has to witness the mess that the son has cooked up all by his lonesome, and can't really do anything with it, and is in the end finds out that he's even being betrayed by his closest friend who does the drug deals behind his back. Like all of that is like dramatic failed dad, failed mob boss character fodder, and I would have thought that Seagal would have attempted to grasp that. Like now finally is your chance to play something dramatic, something quote unquote deep,
Mm.
and Seagal just doesn't care.
Yeah, what a missed opportunity also to get at least one film where they would shoot Steven Seagal's character. No, that can't happen because the gun is pointed at the father who dies, and Well, Seagal's character goes to jail at least.
Yeah, but then again, Seagal is infamous for the fact that his characters can't die. Like the biggest in doing background, I went through and read some interviews with the directors who have done these direct to DVD collaborations with Seagal.
Nice.
And perhaps the most telling one came from the director of, once again, really subpar Seagal action film, Code of Honor. It's this mystery action film. Some vigilante is killing gangsters, like the Punisher style, in somewhere US, and there's a cop chasing that guy, and it for the longest time it tries to hide, kind of paint you the picture that the cop is having like two separate personalities, that he is the cop and he's the Punisher vigilante. And in the very end it turns out that no, the vigilante is Seagal, like really, and he and the cop know each other. And the film ends with, them having a knife fight. The cop helicopter shows up. The Seagal jumps through. They are fighting on a rooftop, so Seagal jumps through some kind of a glass ceiling, lands inside of the warehouse, and the cop helicopter is pointing a light at Seagal. Seagal stands there in the spotlight. Previously, he has rigged the warehouse with C4, so now he pulls out the detonator, looks at the helicopter, and pushes the trigger, and the whole warehouse explodes. There's like no question what happens. Seagal explodes himself in the air, and even following this scene, they show the charred corpse, like they are carrying it out of the warehouse. And the director, in that interview, the director told us that Seagal himself, however, like honest to God, believes that his character survived that and just faked his death.
Okay.
So when it comes to whole Steven Seagal's characters don't die in Steven Seagal movies, except Machete, and that was not Steven Seagal film. And even in Machete, Seagal's character kills himself.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Puts the whatever katana inside him.
yeah. But yeah, this is like a real sticking point for Seagal. His characters just can't die. It's not allowed in Steven Seagal universe. And if that managed to somehow, go past Seagal, so that the final film would implicate that Seagal died in the movie, but well, then Seagal does his very own headcanon, where he somehow justifies that no, in reality my character did not die in that film, where I exploded myself into 1,000 pieces.
But this film has one quote that is pretty decent. You're gonna shoot me or bore me to death. I got family up there waiting on me, up there where I'm gonna go. So I don't need to go to listen to a little boy trying to sound like a man when he's just a piece of shit wrapped in human skin. End quote. Maybe not the most original, but that was a pretty badass character there. Anything else?
Well, nothing major. Not really. Like, it's really boring.
Yeah.
It's not as obscure story-wise as was Attack Force, but the story is nothing special. This is kind of extremely simplistic B-level crime thriller thing. It's actually it's done so cheaply that when when there's the scene at the kid's funeral and there's a priest, like there always is on these scenes. Well, apparently the costume department didn't even have the money to buy a priest's collar. The priest is some dude in a suit who wears a tie, and it's a priest because he says like the does the priestly monologue, and he's holding a Bible in his hand. So that's the level. That's the level of budget, and that's the level of commitment we are dealing with here.
Sometimes I feel that it was a mistake to even bring these two horrible films to this episode, but I think it's only fair for to look at the Steven Seagal's career as such as it is.
Well, this is a complete look at Steven Seagal's career.
Yeah.
Like, of course, it would have been more entertaining for us.
Hmm.
It would have been meant better films had we just, stick with the early career. Just watch the highlights.
Henrik, we can always do Steven Seagal episode 2.
Talking about Steven Seagal episode 2. Fucking nobody wants to really watch Steven Seagal movies. I once had a friend who has the idea that we are gonna have a Steven Seagal marathon. Everybody brings a Steven Seagal movie. There was a group of us, and we are gonna marathon it. It was hyped. Like Friday night, we're gonna have a Steven Seagal marathon. Don't forget Steven Seagal marathon. Are you ready for Steven Seagal marathon?
Cool, dude.
We watched the first film, and he was like, "Yeah, what we gonna watch next?" And he started to pick something other than Steven Seagal, and we were like, no, you can't do that. I mean, come on, man, this is Steven Seagal marathon. We're gonna watch Steven Seagal films. So we watched the second one, and following that one, that the dude just called it off and switched the movie to Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, there is something weird about Steven Seagal movies because none of them are really good, but then you're somehow drawn into this ruthless this character who is just so badass that it kind of entertains you with certain scenes here and there, but not completely able to hold the entire movie on his shoulders. And then you still go back to these movies somehow.
That only applies to the first Steven Seagal films.
Yeah.
Like Above the Law
Yeah.
was okay action movie. I really didn't think that it was great. It's not a classic. I just kind of watched it and was like, yeah, this is okay. But it did have a cool kill, which I did like, which is the parking lot reversing the dude on the train tracks.
And at least the fighting is still energetic.
Yeah. And Under Siege, once again, okay action film. It's not any kind of a like a great beast. It's not a classic, nothing like that. But it's okay. It has some cool action scenes. But the later you get on Steven Seagal's career, the more and more the films become just absolute dog shit, and there's just less and less fighting. That's also something that differentiates is a difference between Attack Force and Beyond the Law. Attack Force, even though it's really shittily done, and it still is extremely boring movie, but it does have more fights and kind of more action than Beyond the Law.
At least with Steven Seagal.
Well, overall, I mean, exactly how many fights do you get in Beyond the Law? Oh, with Steven Seagal, you have one fight and one scene where he just, gets up from the chair, walks across the room, and shoots three guys.
Well, there are firefights with the ex-police out for revenge. But that's it.
Yeah. But honest to God, there really is not that many action scenes in Beyond the Law.
No. Yeah, the thing is that once you get to the 2000s, 2003 forwards with Steven Seagal movies, they are such absolute garbage, the films, at least the vast majority of them, that you really don't need to bother with any of them. They are so bad, and in the case of Attack Force, just bad and dull to the point that there's nothing even too much fun to say about the film. It's just not even funny because it's so bad. Special mention for an actor goes to...
This was actually pretty tough one.
Yep.
Because there are so many appearances and actors in throughout all of these movies. For the longest time, I was going to give this to Michael Caine, who was absolutely slumming for the paycheck because no jobs were coming to his direction in On Deadly Ground, and oh boy, can you tell? Like, this is one of the least giving shit Michael Caine performance I've seen, but it's still best performance of that film because at least Michael Caine chose the scene and is extremely hammy in his I'm the bad guy moments. But in the end, I just can't give it to Michael Caine alone. So my pick is absolutely everyone, especially the ladies who have had to work with Steven Seagal. You guys, you all really earn it.
Oh, nice pick. Yeah, maybe it's the fact that I saw now Beyond the Law as the last movie from Steven Seagal now, and but I'm gonna go with actually maybe maybe the only really great performance of the film is coming from the actor of Stranger Things, where he played Tommy H. Chester Rushing, who is the kid who gets killed. Chance. I believed that, the terror in that scene. It was pretty good, right?
Well, it was at least in Beyond the Law's terms.
Mm.
I wasn't blown away by it by any means, but at least he did portray an emotion,
He did. Unlike Steven Seagal.
unlike Steven Seagal in any of his movies, even in his best days.
What resonated with you most? Most memorable experience and all that?
Well, it goes to his early films. Steven Seagal always has had this kind of sadistic streak when it comes to the violence in his movies. Like there is a sadistic element to the violence that he shows in the movies. But at least some of that sadism did work for me in his earlier films. So what resonated with me the most would be some of the more gruesome death kills in his early films. Like for example the guy who gets reversed into the train tracks in Beyond the Law, getting the main CIA bad guy at the very end of Beyond the Law. Um, the helicopter explosion in Under Siege. There are those individual action beats that I really thought that, oh yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, that brutal side. That unhingedness, that everything is possible when your body
Yeah,
is Tommy Lee Jones.
yeah. To some, that is honest to God problem. Like I have come face to face with the argument that Seagal's films are so sadistic that it actually takes viewers out of the experience. And that's
Nah.
something that most definitely can happen to some. It didn't happen to me, but that once again, that's perhaps says more about me as a person than the films themselves. So if you don't like a certain level of sadism in your action movies, and especially in the depiction of violence, then maybe think twice before popping in a Steven Seagal.
The biggest parts that I liked were the events where Steven Seagal still could pull off a smile, seemed that he was enjoying himself, thinking of himself as a somewhat charismatic lead who is able to kick ass and pull off some pretty decent one-liners every now and then. That's the Steven Seagal, that's the ass-kicking Steven Seagal that I do miss, and I understand that he is almost pulling 70 now, but still, man, you can still be in shape and you could even look the same as you did in 89 if you would put a little bit effort, but he doesn't. In one adjective, how would you describe Seagal's films?
To put all of them into one adjective, I have to go and this is something where I'm not exactly 100% unified, but it is the sentiment that kind of highlights my episode of my experience of watching five Steven Seagal movies as a whole. It's boring. Even in his best movies, I just didn't fully get into the action. That there are some great action set pieces, some great moments that I thought that yeah, that was hella cool. But even with that, I wasn't blown away by Above the Law. I wasn't blown away by Under Siege, even though I think that it may be the best of the Die Hard but in X movies. But mostly, I was just bored. Especially when I look at my experience and my time with all these five movies together.
Yeah, and the pain that you feel when you go to Apple TV store and you realize that you have to rent Attack Force for $3.99.
Yeah, it's money that I will never actually get back because this podcast makes no profit.
In one adjective, how would I describe Seagal's films? Confusing, for sure. It's a bit of a confusing career where you have themes that you could take somewhere, but then you just completely make no use of them. Like the Native American theme is completely abysmal on Deadly Ground. Environmental themes, kind of leftist themes combined with ass kickery is an interesting concept, but confusing, yeah. And then that the way that his career plummets, a lot of wasted opportunities here. But it just comes down to the fact that Steven Seagal is not able to, I guess, give anything better. Obviously, favorite quote, if any.
Goes to on boring ground. You used to be a good man, now you are nothing but a whore. That at least that was a good line in one of these films.
I'll go with Under Siege in this case. Come on, that's not striking an officer. That's striking an officer. Would you consider to watch these Steven Seagal films ever again? No.
Well, I'm not in any way looking forward to the moment, but perhaps Above the Law and Under Siege. On Deadly Ground, most definitely not. Or that as boring as it is, it's still in the department of possible watchability. Attack Force is no, fucking no, and the same goes for the Beyond the Law.
Yeah, no need to watch this on my part. I've seen Under Siege so many times now, and the Finnish TV channel and TV3 and the other commercially running engines, and I suppose maybe even the government side TV channels, they have, holy crap, God, they have airwaved this film so many times that I think enough is enough. It's not that good of a film anyway. And I'm not particularly interested in even the cheapo 80s Steven Seagal films. I'm not even sure what I'm even interested in Steven Seagal's career, but
I must confess that I was really surprised that we went with Steven Seagal.
it's kind of the maybe the cringe factor, the parts that you're not supposed to laugh at, but it's unintentionally funny on occasion. That's what I enjoy about Steven Seagal. Do you think these films have any staying power or legacy? Yeah, a few of his first films will live on, obviously, but none of these are gems. Just a collection of average action films with some above the average occasional moments.
Yeah, on my end, I have to say no. I don't see a staying power or legacy with any of these. When it comes to his early works, which arguably are his better ones, I do think that those are not great enough to hold a legacy. Like even Under Siege, which is like, in my opinion, from the best end of the Die Hard, but in X movies, even as it is, it's still in the end it's just an okay action movie in the sea of okay action movies. When it comes to legacy of Steven Seagal's films, I would many people want to see these films like that they do hold a legacy, but I would counter argue that it's not the films, it's Steven Seagal. Like Steven Seagal has the legacy that we now kind of give to the films, and I don't believe that even Steven Seagal himself has a true legacy. It's like Steven Seagal's star and his fandom, even though he still has fans, that they have been diminishing, like in a rapid rate, in my opinion, throughout the film, throughout the years. These days, even though Steven Seagal is repeatedly being mentioned, he's more mentioned in a sarcastic way. He's mentioned because of how you said it, the cringe factor.
Mm.
Like we are not talking about Steven Seagal. Even this episode was not about Steven Seagal because Steven Seagal is such of a great action star, or he made such of a great action films. We were kind of doing it to look at his career, knowing that the later end of his career is completely batshit bonkers. Like Steven Seagal, he is not like Schwarzenegger or Stallone or Eastwood, or perhaps even in Bruce Willis, even though Bruce Willis himself is sabotaging Bruce Willis as hard as he possibly can these days. But you know, with Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Eastwood, with those guys, you can say that they are some type of icons, that they are kind of being cemented into what is an action movie. That those guys have a legacy. Terminator will have a legacy. Conan the Barbarian will have a legacy. Dirty Harry will have a legacy. Spaghetti Westerns have a legacy. Rambo has legacy. But I see none of that. None of it in Steven Seagal. I don't see Conan when I look at Under Siege. I don't see Dirty Harry when I look at Above the Law. I don't see Stallone in Seagal. That's something that kind of goes very well into the 90s action stars. Like 90s action stars, very few of them, in my opinion, has managed to build themselves a career that would lend them a real legacy. Something like Jean-Claude Van Damme, even though he's really on the margin, not guaranteed the least, but perhaps he has like reached out enough. He has the serious action thrillers and the goofy video game Street Fighter movie, and then he has the movies where he just laughs at himself. So perhaps there's enough variety that he will manage to create some kind of a legacy. Steven Seagal just is a Steven Seagal. He's just a stone-faced dude who can't act, who can't laugh at himself,
Yeah,
who got the career because fuck, I don't even understand why. Like
because it was like a studio showcase that hey, I can make anyone an action star, right?
yeah,
And then
yeah,
it
because
got
it was a
bonkers.
showcase of one agent's power within the system. And because of that, I really don't see a legacy in Steven Seagal, even though he still today, as we are doing the episode, he still is being recognized. But once again, that recognition comes largely from cringe factor. It comes also largely from the fact that yearly he pushes out one really shitty direct-to-video, I'm just hanging here, Steven Seagal feature
Or two.
or two. But I kind of feel that you and we are kind of presenting the last generation of action movie fans that will give Steven Seagal kind of any kind of a shadow of noticeability, any kind of a shadow of a legacy. And even us are doing it kind of to laugh at Seagal himself, to
That's
point
true,
out
yeah.
his many failings. This episode has been me pointing out his all sexual harassment cases and laughing at his shitty book and poking fun at his movies. And I feel that would you and I would we have kids someday? Perhaps as a dad, we would showcase our kid a Steven Seagal film. Like this is something that I watched when I was when I was your age, and most likely our kid would never understand what the fuck we saw in Steven Seagal, and our grandkids. I doubt they will ever even hear about Steven Seagal. They will hear about Schwarzenegger. They will hear about Stallone, Eastwood.
Yeah,
But to me,
yeah.
Seagal is fading star.
Yeah, as you said, we're kind of laughing at Steven Seagal, and as a kind of course, an extremely professional podcast host, it makes me sad that this is the starting point of this entire episode. I remember that back in the early 2000s, my brother was fascinated by the Steven Seagal films, along with my friend, and my friend and my brother would look at a bunch of Steven Seagal films, and at times we had like a blast. We would just laugh so much at some of these scenes. But now, kind of maybe looking at this solo and looking at his career as a whole, it's any more hard to see what was so funny about it. Was it just that we were younger? It had more laughs as a kid, possibly. But the problem of these movies is that none of them are able to kind of have something so special that you would say that, hey, let's go watch Fire Down Below tonight. No, there is none of that. But would you recommend these 6 Steven Seagal films?
I wouldn't.
No.
No.
Yeah.
Uh, if there's nothing, absolutely nothing, like if they come across you on Netflix and you have absolutely seen everything else that is on Netflix, in that case, Above the Law and Under Siege are pretty safe bets. They are not great films, but they are okay. But even that, you can find way better action movies, in my opinion. And when it comes to the rest of today's outings, like mentioned, on Deadly Ground, I found it really boring, and it's kind of even mystery to me because I as a leftist libtard would be someone who would resonate very strongly with the film's theme that oil is bad, as I see that the global oil dependency as something that will doom the planet, and I also see it as a national security hazard. So you would think that oil is bad action movies would be something down on my right down on my alley, and technically, like it has action set pieces. There was like every now and then people try to come up with these mathematical formulas. Like in an action movie, you have to have an explosion every 10 minutes or every 15 minutes. And in that sense, On Deadly Ground kind of holds up. But I never connect with the action. That's my biggest
Mm.
problem with all of these films. I don't connect with the action. I don't connect with Steven Seagal. People talk that Steven Seagal has this charisma, but I've never felt it myself.
Whatever charisma there was, it was gone after the late 90s.
Yeah, and to me it never was there. So I really I don't recommend the movies. Above the Law
Yeah.
and on Deathly Above the Law and Under Siege, pretty safe bets if absolutely nothing is on. But no, I'm not recommending even those.
Yeah, it is actually the same for me that I would not recommend any of these. But if I have to choose something as the most entertaining, the one that is maybe the best of this bunch, Again, we could have selected a lot of different films. We could have selected Out for a Kill, which I would argue is better than Above the Law. But nevertheless, Career Starter, Above the Law, is a good point to look at here. So I wouldn't recommend any, but Fire Down Below was the most entertaining. In what order would you put these films?
In my opinion, perhaps Under Siege, Above the Law. Then it comes tricky. Perhaps still, despite all the negativity, On Deadly Ground, Fire Down Below, then Beyond the Law, and Attack Force would be the very least.
Well, Under Siege could be argued to be technically the best film here. Yeah, most definitely. But for me, as a matter of opinion, the most fun, Fire Down Below, so I'll put it as first, and Under Siege, closely followed by there. And then third, On Deadly Ground, because I think it's unintentionally hilarious at times, but still gets very boring and slowed down in the middle part when Seagal spends time in the Native American community.
Oh god, yeah, that goes on and on and on.
Yeah. And then would be Above the Law, because I think it's just quite boring. Beyond the Law after that, and Attack Force as the last one. Well, complete the sentence. You really know you're watching Steven Seagal films when?
You really know you're watching Steven Seagal films when you are in the middle of a movie and, hey, wait, what's this? Jesus. Didn't notice that. A letter of some sort. Just... Oh, look! It's a sexual harassment lawsuit.
You really know you're watching Steven Seagal films when you cramp up in the same film Michael Caine, oil rigs, sexual harassment, and Native Americans.
Well, that was 6 films of Steven Seagal and 3 beers.
Okay.
Which you can count in case Karri leaves or the opening a beer can sounds into the finished product.
Why not?
At least it sheds a light exactly how backwards production this is. Like,
We have
opening a beer can.
We have received some feedback every now and then that it adds to the mood of the studio when we have some background sounds every now and then, like opening beer cans and rattling papers.
Breaking glass and cats meowing.
falling beer cans. Something from a Halloween episode. God, I'm so tired that I'm having trouble forming basic sentences at this point. But
yeah, perhaps this is the time to cap off the episode.
So what are we looking at next, Henrik?
Well, that's exactly the right reaction, seeing exactly how much in trouble we are once again.
This will be the biggest trouble we will ever be in this podcast. Because in the next episode, we'll do a podcasting career suicide and visit Syria. Muhammad Malas.
The fucking latest civil war is still ongoing.
Yep.
We are talking about movies that depict actual pain and hardships of people who even today are going through that experience. Jesus Christ.
So yeah, that's gonna be in 2 weeks from now. But what did you think of Seagal films? Come and connect with us on our social media pages. And we'll hope you'll leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts unless you're a Seagal aficionado. Thank you for joining us. See you in a fortnight.
Until then.
And then Seagal responds, I'm gonna do that. Two beautiful twins like you. Gets a man thinking.
Fucking God, Seagal.
Seagal going, I need to clean my house, so how about we do stuff tomorrow, okay? Mitenköhän helkkarissa? Niin mä etin jotakin, jos olisi löytynyt Syyriasta jotain mielenkiintoisia aiheita, koska hulluhan mä oon. No ainakaan tätä ei voi enää monimutkaisemmaksi tehdä, eihän.
Okay, hey, alright. In this shot, I'm gonna use my magic to run up that wall and then jump over the roof. Okay, great. Can we get those wires in here, please? Whoa, hey! Who said anything about wires? I saw that Chinese movie like 4 times. I didn't see any wires. Yeah, that's because they were digitally removed. Oh really? So maybe I should digitally remove your head from your body. Because people are paying good American money to see me fly. Stupid. That's very good. Oh, what's that? Oh, you think I should? I don't know. He seems like a nice guy. What? Yeah. You know, he makes a good point.
It's block throw, block throw, block throw, block throw, block throw, block throw, block finisher.